Well, kia ora everyone. My name is Matthew Tukaki. I am the Executive Director of New Zealand's Maori Council. The Maori people are obviously the First Nations people of this land, Aotearoa. Up until a few weeks ago, our people and many New Zealanders were unaware of a document called the Doctrine of Discovery. Signed in 1493 by Pope Alexander in the Vatican, essentially it gave European monarchies and European nations carte blanche over any lands that they may discover. Essentially, it was targeted towards the discovery of new lands in the Americas by Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus. But essentially, and to simplify it, it required nothing more than a European representative of a European monarch to plant a flag or to claim land where otherwise non-Christian people may have inhabited it. If they were non-Christian, they didn't count. That basically means that every First Nations people across the world was subject to the Vatican's Doctrine of Discovery edict, signed no less by a Pope who was very controversial at the time. Over many, many years, as explorers departed their shores from Europe to discover places in Africa, in Asia, in the Pacific, in the Americas, all around the world, it was a myth that they had discovered something new, because there were already human beings and people here, and we now know them to be the First Nations peoples of the lands of which they inhabited. But they were not Christian, and that is what the Doctrine of Discovery had at its heart. Carte blanche and permission for European monarchies and European representatives of monarchies and governments and nation states to claim land and to claim whole swathes of land where there were no Christians. Didn't matter that they were human beings. It also set forth a train of events that would occur over many, many centuries about the expunging of rights of Indigenous peoples no matter where they were, including my own people, Māori here in New Zealand, after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi all those years ago. It also highlighted in a case in the Supreme Court in the United States in the early 1820s, in 1823, and let me just read you this. In a Supreme Court decision, a case between Johnson v. McIntosh, the Doctrine of Discovery became part of US federal law and was used to dispossess native peoples of their land. In a unanimous decision, Chief Justice John Marshall wrote that the principle of discovery gave European nations an absolute right to the new worlds. This was a landmark moment in the affairs of Native American people in that country. So after many, many centuries and many, many decades, what we've seen is the intergenerational trauma of First Nations peoples right around the world. And that is why it is time for an accounting of the Vatican to ensure that this document is expunged, is reinterpreted, and an apology issued to First Nations peoples right across the world. When we have a look at what set events in train, when it came to the treatment of Indigenous peoples on their own lands that they had walked and lived and hunted and gathered on for many, many centuries, we cannot get away from the birthplace of where a lot of these European monarchies sought legal dalliance. And it was this, the Doctrine of Discovery. Over the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing a couple of things, because I believe it is time for the Vatican to be held to account. Now, I don't speak on behalf of all First Nations peoples or even my own people, the Māori people, but I do speak on behalf of those who feel that the Vatican needs to be held to account for the sins of their past. And this was a sin. So let me just take you through what some of those sins look like. Millions and tens of millions of lives have been taken since 1493, whether it be the Spanish conquest of the Americas, the treatment of Native American people, the treatment of Indigenous, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people in Australia, or even the treatment of Pacifica nations, my people, and then we can't get away from the many, many deaths in Africa. The slave trade, those who were traded as nothing more than flora or fauna to be used at the discretion of the European masters. All of these things haven't just happened over hundreds of years. These go back right through to 1493. Today, have a look at what our peoples look like. Per head of population, Indigenous peoples per head of population in their countries, including here in New Zealand, are more likely to be incarcerated. They're more likely to fill the prison populations. They are more likely to have their children taken away from them into state care. They're more likely to be homeless. They're more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely to be the highest per head of population consumers of the mental health system. We're more likely not to be able to afford a house or a car, put food on the table of our children. We're still treated like second-class citizens in many countries around the world. When we fight back for our lands, when we fight back to protect our resources, we're killed. As is the case with what is happening in the Amazon right now. These are things that are not just historic. These are the things that continue to this day. And we need a watershed moment, a landmark moment where the sins of the past are atoned for, an apology is given, and we can all move forward together in partnership. So a lot of people will blame the state, and so they should. A lot of people should blame the Crown, and they must. A lot of people will blame their colonial masters, and they should. But we should also go right back to the heart of where many of these began, and that was with the Doctrine of Discovery and the Vatican. So, as I said before, in the coming days and over the next week, and as a link to this video, I'm starting a petition and calling on the Vatican to time to account. Time to account to the First Nations peoples around the world and those who have been taken unnecessarily through the conquest of our lands and our peoples. I'll also be writing directly to Pope Francis, who I believe is a good man who has seen firsthand what has been happening in South America. That's where he's from. He knows the plight of Indigenous peoples in that country. But for my own people, for the Maori people, it is really important that we not forget that the trauma that was visited on us wasn't just by one or two people or three or four. It was by a great many. And to get to the root cause of where it began, we must dig further. We must go harder. So I say to you, Pope Francis, I say to you, please, it is time. It is time to forgive the sins of the Father. Sure, that's your take. That was your Pope. That was your tipuna. That was your ancestor. But he was not ours. He was a man that created harm, havoc, and trauma that has lasted many hundreds of years. I urge you, when you receive my letter, please accept our invitation to kānuhi ki te kānuhi, to meet face to face, brothers to brothers, whānau to whānau, sisters to sisters, family to family. So for once we can take this Doctrine of Discovery document and firmly plant it into the ground, never to be seen again. Please share this video, please comment below, please get involved in the conversation. If you are a First Nations person, I say to you, be proud of your colour, be proud of your language, be proud of your history, be proud of your culture. Because I know as a Māori person, a man of colour, and I'm so proud of mine, and I will do everything I can to ensure that yours is as richly valued as I value mine. Ka kite.